Hi everybody, Nick Blazer here with another position analysis video. Last couple we've gone over some opening fundamental kind of plays. Maybe last one being a little bit more challenging than the one before it. I appreciate all the feedback about those too. It sounds like people like covering kind of fundamental concepts like that too. That's cool because that's a lot of where my passion in teaching lies, I guess I would say. I feel very motivated to figure out how to write a book about that in some way, about like how to find the right game plans and strategies consistently, and maybe like spot those key features in positions as opposed to getting into the nitty gritty of like tactics and roles and exactly what's going to happen, and not having like five different ideas to wrestle with in a position, but one clear goal that you're trying to do, right? Something like this. So here's a 3-2 to play in this position. Last time we looked and we had a compelling reason to pass up on a hit in our own outfield and make an anchor instead. Here with the 3-2 we have that option instead too. But yeah, I'm curious. I mean, you've had a little time to look at this now. So were you thinking, is this another position where we should just anchor past instead, or should we go ahead and hit here? Let's talk. We can talk about it a little bit too, and we'll start with the merit of anchoring. Our opponent has a better board than us, and they also have the all-important 5 point, right? So this is pretty key. They've broken the 8 point, which is a nice priming point, so it's probably a little bit maybe, and with a blot on the deuce, I would think of this as more of a blitzing position as well. So anchoring goes up in value against a structure like that. Um, the 22 point is not as strong of an anchor as the 21, though. We can still get primed back there. Of course, not that much risk with the checker behind, but it's looking pretty good. And additionally, after we anchor up on the 22, we're still behind very good structure. Our opponent can develop the 6 and form a priming point that way, things like that. We're down in the race. So I don't really feel like I feel like we've taken away a lot of offensive potential, but I certainly don't feel like we're leading this game in any sense after that play. Um, so now after the hit, of course, it's very nice to send a third checker back and only have two back of our own. And different than the last time we saw a position like this. If you haven't watched the last video, by the way, maybe this will make a little more sense. But in this position when we hit, we actually, we only have a 1 point board, but we also have the bar point, which it's a difficult one to describe exactly how to count this because it doesn't represent a point that our opponent can fan on or something like this, but it does represent additional challenge for these two checkers back as well as a third one when we send things back. Like it's just more to deal with for our opponent and more offensive in the way that we have. This can be converted to blitz material if it goes that way. We have more checkers in the zone, so we have 9 here as opposed to 8. Um, yeah, and so there's a little bit more going on in this position when we send another checker back. But the big thing that I think really sticks out in this position and calls for a hit is something that we need to look for that maybe you could think of it as tactics, but a key feature of this position that I haven't mentioned yet is that there's blots around the board. Um, when we hit, there are still two more blots as well. They're well positioned as builders, where if we give our opponent their full roll, they're very likely to make either a great asset in the 4 points or the bar point or the 8 point. If I went through all the rolls, I guess I could figure it out that way, but it looks like there might not be any roll that doesn't do one of those things, right? So this concept is the tempo hit a little bit, where in addition to the usual game plan things of sending a third checker back behind structure and gaining a race advantage for ourselves, now we have a game plan to play into. Um, even though sometimes we really need to respect that 5 points, well, here what we really need to respect is how likely it is that our opponent will build something great next roll if we give them their full roll. So I think for that reason, the hit of course is good for a lot of reasons, but I think it's much bigger here than maybe in other positions. And if we run this one, we'll see. Yeah, we are indeed supposed to hit, and that it's a ways off to make the anchor instead. The variant of hitting, we like to step up and challenge and try to escape. Even though we're going to be hit back from the bar quite a bit. Well, there's only 8 in the zone right now. We might get an anchor out of it. They're never going to point on head for the most part because they only have half their roll. And maybe more than all those things, well, it doesn't. We're still going to be attacked a lot back here when we stay deep and we don't get another blot involved that we have to clean up while we're loose on this side. So you can consider it almost respecting their board to not get another blot involved and to just step up under the gun instead. Um, but yeah, so how do we test an idea like this that indeed it is the blots? We could maybe clean up these 2 blots in the outfield and make the 8 point and see if it changes the equities between the plays quite a bit here. And now that things aren't laying around, it's still, for all the reasons we mentioned, nice to hit and step up. But it's much closer. It's not like a giant blunder anymore to go for that. So we can think about anchoring a little more here, right? It's just again, I think having the offense is a big piece of this. So if we have no offense now too, and just are like clearly on defense, maybe we get a little closer here. We're getting more near the last position we had, but okay, still we need to hit in this one. Um, so I think what we're also seeing here too is that it's quite a bit more. It's worth quite a bit more to be making the 21 point than the 22 point as well. So let's bring those back down. Original position was spread out like this. So an interesting variant to start with is what if we had a 4-3 here instead and could then hit and pop out, play down, whatever it is, or make the 21 point instead, right? And the point that our opponent has is slotted is a little bit better. But with everything given, I don't feel like we should be too surprised that we still hit, but it's getting a lot closer now. And so now if we go back to this variant where we don't have any in offense, or let's start with the 8 point first. Instead of like the tempo gain, let's just give them back their points and see if we like to anchor against this now. Oh, I took checkers off the board. Let's put those back on. I noticed them in the tray over here. Easy thing to do when we adjust positions. Yeah, and we're getting to like the break-even point now, okay? So I think for the reasons described, like, I mean, it should be fairly clear here too. Another characteristic we had in the last position was, or yeah, and the one that we did last week, was that we were stripping the midpoint and running out of timing and things, which is not an issue here. We are sending a checker all the way from the inner board back instead of from in the outfield, like half escaped here. So some differences there too. But perhaps we would just have to respect the game plan and play a different game like this. I don't know. This even still feels like I should hit. Yeah. Um, so yeah, it can be really tough in these games to like figure out like how each of these features points to it. And I feel like this kind of shows us too, uh, like why Simon struggled with. He's the one that sent me the position last week. Why he struggled not to hit in that position. It's because it is a bit of an exception. And it is like if we get into this sort of style of thinking that the default is always just to send another checker back, that's always a good thing, and it's not too far off. Well, sometimes all the right position or like all the right features can pop up at once, and suddenly we have an exception to it, right? So when we get into thinking about backgammon like good plays, we might miss stuff like this. But if we think first about what is the position calling for and what do I really need, and can see when the anchor is super called for versus a tempo hit, something like this, um, then we're more likely to find plays like this and to choose the right strategic decisions and see them quickly too. Yeah. So hopefully, I bet this was an intuitive one, and I hope some of the variants where it's more reasonable to anchor kind of help see something in this position too, and when that might change, so that we're aware that we can think about making a play like that and leaving the blot behind. But in this particular structure, generally going to be pretty strong to send a third checker back to our two, and have some advantage in this game and kind of go for something in the opening. Yeah. So I hope that helped out, and I'll be back with more position analysis videos soon. So thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these, like the videos. This came from Backgammon Strategy post, by the way. So I'm always looking for positions to work on. If I catch them from there, I'll share them here occasionally. But send positions you're interested in me reviewing too, and I'm happy to make a video out of them. All right. Bye, everybody.